Hello! In this video, I'll just quickly talk about lessons 5 and 6. So lessons 5, we're starting to get into the programming here. We're talking about the need for programming languages and then sort of a little bit of an intro to programming. This will be sort of a step-by-step thing in Code.org. So let's just take a look here. In Code.org, there's not too much about why you need a programming language. So this sort of steps you through a little bit. The basic, the gist of it is that a natural language like English or any sort of common spoken language is not very specific. There is a lot of sort of being unclear. There's a lot of sort of interpretation given the situation, given who we're talking to, that we all take into account to understand what someone's saying. And even then, right, there's some things that are unclear. I can say something to you, and to one student, and to another student, it might mean something different. Oftentimes it's very similar, but there might be a few little issues, right, with the interpretation. So there's a couple little programming jokes here. Be sure to tell them at the dinner table tonight, because people will be just rolling on the floor laughing. Maybe not. But, there is just to try to highlight the issues that there are with natural language. It is not always clear. So that goes into that. Thinking about instructions in terms of what constitute bad instructions. I'm sure you've received some sort of product and the instructions were kind of unintelligible. What was sort of bad about those instructions? What makes good instructions, right? I've built enough IKEA and Lego sets in my life to, notice that they do not use words at all, right? It's sort of all with pictographs or pictures. Is that a good idea? How does that, versus trying to write it out? Could you do that? Is it good to have a mix? So these are just things for you to think about. Like it says here, imagine we're going to redesign human language to be really clear at giving instructions. What changes would you make? So again, this here is a little bit for you to think. And some of you who've got a bit of a programming language or programming background, will get that really quickly. Others of you, you might have to think about, well, why do we have separate languages? Why don't we just program in English? Why don't we just program in, a common language? Why do we have to learn another programming language? And that will just sort of get you thinking there. Okay. Like I said in the second part, and we'll jump into Code.org in a second there is a bit more about how the programming work here. So you're going to sort of do this, you're going to think about things, okay, and then modify it. So these are sort of the discussion prompts here. Obviously, this is something maybe for you to put your notes in here to think about, to add it in there so that you can understand. It does sort of run through when you're going through the Code.org here. I've just put them in here for you to sort of keep track of that as well. And there's a little bit about what's going on here, program statements, some vocabulary that you should be aware of as well. But just jumping into Code.org there, because that will really show you. Like I said, lesson 5 here doesn't really say too much, okay? There's just a little bit of check your understanding, and you can sort of summarize your thinking there. Lesson 6 is where you're going to step through, like I mentioned, sort of learning how to program with the guidance there. So just taking a look here, click back on teacher view or student view there. You've got some code here. They've given you this little bit of block so you can drag it over and you can run it and kind of figure out what's going on. Just a few things. This is supposed to be sort of your phone app, right? This is where our programming is. You can drag this in to make your life a little bit easier. I like to keep this in here just so I don't have to type as much. Okay, that just makes your life a little bit easier. There's a tab there for, in this case, functions. They've given you a very limited toolbox at the start. Okay, and the idea is that this will expand as you get better. Well, not so much better, but you learn more. And there's also a console down here. So this is kind of behind the scenes, what's going on, right? And this little slider here makes the code run faster or slower, so you can sort of step through. We'll talk a little bit more of this with debugging, but one of the things that you can do is if you slow it down, because it sort of, it goes sort of step by step, you can kind of see what happens. Okay. And so really, again, it's just for you to sort of read through, play around, feel free to do more than it just asks here. What happens if I do this? What if I do that? Right? Break it. Okay. You can always, there's a reset somewhere here. I think you can reset it with no problem. I don't see it at the moment. It might just be hidden. But yeah, you can definitely reset it somewhere. If you're having trouble with that, I'll find that out, but there's somewhere you can reset it. Okay. So yeah, feel free to mess it up, try different things. That's how you're really going to understand it. Just reading isn't going to cut it, right? You need to actually get your hands dirty, get your mouse dirty, okay? Get your keyboard dirty, whatever you want to say, to actually learn this stuff. And like I always say, break it, try to mess it up, see what happens when you do something. Another good thing to do is make a change, predict what you think is going to happen, run it, and see if that prediction turns out. If it does, then you can sort of say to yourself, okay, I'm beginning to understand it. My mental model of how I think it's working seems to match up with how it really works. If it doesn't work, then you've got the opposite. Well, why didn't it work? What's wrong with my mental model? So always be very active thinking as you're working through this. Do not just sort of, like I said, paint by numbers kind of thing here. Turn your brain off and just sort of run through it as quickly as you can. That is not the intention. Okay. Now, for some of you who've done some programming, this will be pretty straightforward. Okay. The syntax is a little bit different than perhaps you're used to if you haven't done a JavaScript before, but there's enough similarities that it should be pretty straightforward. So just make sure you step through these. Like I said, it sort of gradually introduces you to what's going on there. And then there's a little question at the end again. Looks like I put the answer in there. Don't look at that answer, please. Don't want to give you those answers. And then you can make sure that you understand what's going on there. All right. So good luck with that. Good luck with, if you're first time doing programming, trying to figure that out. But it should be pretty straightforward.